Episode U: The Smith Family Reputation Exposed. While some historians state that 45 Palmyra residents signed affidavits in the spring of 1833 declaring the Smith family destitute of moral character, my research uncovered something even more striking. I found two distinct sets of witness statements, not from the spring, but from November 3rd to December 4th, 1833. Together, these testimonies total 62 individuals who spoke about the Smith family's reputation. Additionally, there are other affidavits from Palmyra residents dating back to the family's time in New York before 1830 that come from 1833, as well as more testimonies that emerged later in the 1880s. This brings up an important question. What did the people of Palmyra really think about the Smith family? While the LDS perspective tends to dominate the narrative, it's crucial to hear from those who lived alongside the Smiths during their final years in New York, before the Church of Christ was established, and as the Book of Mormon claims took shape. Let's begin with the earliest of the affidavits, the testimony of 11 Smith acquaintances. 11 Smith acquaintances, November 3rd, 1833. We, the undersigned, being personally acquainted with the family of Joseph Smith Sr., with whom the celebrated Gold Bible, so-called, originated, state that they were not only a lazy, indolent set of men, but also intemperate, and their word was not to be depended upon, and that we are truly glad to dispense with their society. These testimonies are striking, aren't they? The Smiths were seen as lazy, indolent, and prone to flights of fancy, traits that don't exactly mesh with the image of a divinely appointed family. Even more troubling is the frequent accusation of dishonesty. When 11 acquaintances come together to say as a group that the Smiths' word was not to be depended upon, it paints a very clear picture. This wasn't an isolated opinion, but a widely held view of the family. Just a month later, we see an even harsher condemnation. The testimony of 51 Smith neighbors. 51 named Smith neighbors, December 4th, 1833. We, the undersigned, have been acquainted with the Smith family for a number of years while they resided near this place, and we have no hesitation in saying that we consider them destitute of that moral character which ought to entitle them to the confidence of any community. They were particularly famous for visionary projects, spent much of their time digging for money, which they pretended was hidden in the earth. To this day, large excavations may be seen not far from their residence, where they used to spend their time digging for hidden treasures. Joseph Smith Sr. and his son Joseph were in particular considered entirely destitute of moral character and addicted to vicious habits. And in reference to all with whom we were acquainted that have embraced Mormonism from this neighborhood, we are compelled to say were very visionary, and most of them destitute of moral character and without influence in this community. This may explain why they were permitted to go on with their impositions undisturbed. It was not supposed that any of them were possessed of sufficient character or influence to make anyone believe their book or their sentiments, and we know not of a single individual in this vicinity that puts the least confidence in their pretended revelations. What's interesting here is the specificity of the accusations. Not only were Joseph Smith Sr. and Jr. entirely destitute of moral character, but they were also involved in treasure-digging schemes, an obsession that would later be reworked into the religious context of the Book of Mormon's golden plates. The people of Palmyra weren't fooled. They knew these men, their habits, their behaviors, and the dubious nature of their claims. Large excavations near their home. These weren't signs of visionary religious fervor, but of relentless greed and delusion. Next, we turn to a particularly damning set of statements from the Stafford family, who lived near the Smiths and occasionally worked with them. The testimony of Barton Stafford. Barton Stafford, witnessed by those. P. Baldwin, November 3rd, 1833. Being called upon to give a statement of the character of the family of Joseph Smith Sr., as far as I know, I can state that I became acquainted with them in 1820 and knew them until 1831 when they left this neighborhood. Joseph Smith Sr. was a noted drunkard, and most of the family followed his example, especially Joseph Jr., who was very much addicted to intemperance. In short, not one of the family had the least claims to respectability. Even after he claimed to be inspired of the Lord to translate the Book of Mormon, He one day got quite drunk while working in my father's field. Finding his legs refused to support him, he leaned on the fence, hanging there for some time. When he finally recovered, he scuffled with a workman, who tore his shirt nearly off. His wife, grieved by his conduct, covered him with her shawl to shield him from the sun and escorted him home. Even while drunk, Joseph frequently made his religion the topic of conversation. The testimony of David Stafford. David Stafford, witnessed by Fred Smith, Justice of the Peace, December 5, 1833. I have been acquainted with the family of Joseph Smith Sr. for several years. I know him to be a drunkard and a liar, much given to gambling. His boys were a lazy set of fellows, particularly Joseph, who followed his father's example and in some respects was worse. When drunk, he was quarrelsome. Before he went to Pennsylvania to get married, we worked together making a coal pit. During work, a dispute arose between us as he had drunk too much, and some hard words were exchanged. As usual, he was ready to fight, and in the scuffle, he got the advantage of me. A gentleman named Ford intervened, but Joseph turned to fight him instead. Both of us lodged complaints against him, and he was fined for breaching the peace. The testimony of Joshua Stafford. Joshua Stafford, 1833. I became acquainted with the family of Joseph Smith Sr. around 1819 or 1820. They were laboring people in low circumstances. Shortly after this, they began digging for hidden treasures and soon became indolent, telling marvelous stories about ghosts, hobgoblins, caverns, and other mysterious matters. The Stafford family, close neighbors of the Smiths, offer testimony that aligns perfectly with what we've already heard. These weren't just outsiders with an axe to grind. They lived side by side with the Smith family and watched their behavior up close. Barton Stafford recounts Joseph Jr. as a drunkard, a claim we'll see corroborated in other statements. His story of a drunken Joseph Jr. hanging on a fence, too intoxicated to stand, is both shocking and revealing. For someone who claimed divine visions, these weren't exactly the actions of a prophet in the making. David Stafford's testimony highlights a different but equally disturbing aspect of Joseph's character, his quarrelsome nature when under the influence. Getting into scuffles, picking fights, and even being fined for breaching the peace. These aren't actions that suggest a divinely guided man, but rather someone lost in vice and poor judgment. And then we have Joshua Stafford, who sheds light on the origins of the Smith family's obsession with treasure digging and the supernatural. For them, life wasn't about hard work or honest living, but about spinning tales of ghosts, hobgoblins, and hidden treasures. Does this sound like the foundation of a new world religion, or a family lost in their own delusions? Even members of the Chase family, who were quite familiar with the Smiths, had damning things to say. The testimony of Parley Chase. Parley Chase, December 13, 1833. I was acquainted with the family of Joseph Smith Sr., both before and after they became Mormons. I can freely state that not one of the male members of the Smith family deserved any credit. They were lazy, intemperate, and worthless men, much given to lying, and often boasted of their skill at it. Their principal occupation was digging for money. As for their gold Bible speculation, they rarely told the same story twice. Joseph Smith Jr., to my knowledge, bore the reputation of being a liar among his neighbors. This statement can be corroborated by all who knew him. By the time we get to Parley Chase, it's clear there's a consensus among the neighbors. The Smith family's reputation was beyond repair. Lazy, intemperate, liars. These words keep repeating in every testimony we encounter. Parley even mentions how Joseph Jr. was known as a liar, not by a few people, but by everyone who knew him. And yet, this same man would go on to claim divine revelations and convince thousands to follow him. It raises an unsettling question. How did someone so thoroughly discredited in his own community rise to become a revered prophet? Abner Cole, editor of the Palmyra Reflector, knew the Smiths personally and shared this scathing indictment of their character. The Palmyra Reflectors take Abner Cole, February 1, 1831. Joseph Smith Sr. had, through misfortune or otherwise, been reduced to extreme poverty before migrating to western New York. His family, large with 9 or 10 children, were never known for much more than ignorance and stupidity, particularly the elder branch, which had a penchant for superstition and a fascination with the marvelous. Abner Cole's comments from the Palmyra Reflector add even more weight to this. By the early 1830s, the Smith family's descent into superstition and poverty was evident to all. Yet Mormonism's story would twist these failures into virtues. Despite these overwhelming testimonies, Joseph Smith's brother, William, tried to defend the family, albeit unconvincingly. In a sermon on June 8, 1884, he claimed, "William Smith's defense. It has generally been stated that my father's family were lazy, shiftless, and poor, but this was never said by our neighbors, at least not until after the angel appeared and the story of the Golden Bible was told." Then, 10 years later, in 1894, William doubled down on this narrative. William Smith, February 26, 1894. It is said that Joseph and the rest of the family were lazy and indolent. We never heard such accusations until after Joseph told his vision. Our neighbors always knew we were hard-working people. We cleared 60 acres of heavy timber, hardly the task of lazy men. We never knew we were bad folks until Joseph's vision, at which point falsehoods about our family spread like wildfire. But William's defense crumbles when compared to Joseph Smith Jr.'s own admissions. In a letter to Oliver Cowdery in December 1834, Joseph confessed, Joseph Smith Jr.'s own words, "During this time, like most youths, I fell into many vices and follies. However, though my accusers have accused me of gross violations, I have never wronged or injured any man or society of men. My imperfections were those of a light, often vain man, exhibiting foolish and trifling conversation." And 4 years later, he admitted once again, Joseph Smith Jr., 1839, "I was left to all kinds of temptations and frequently fell into many foolish errors, displaying the weaknesses of youth and the corruption of human nature, which I am sorry to say, led me into many temptations offensive in the sight of God." These admissions, written by Joseph himself, cover the period from 1820 to 1823, revealing the very weaknesses that his neighbors accused him of. Even though this manuscript was written in 1839 and later revised by Willard Richards in 1842, it confirms the Smith family's reputation long before Mormonism took hold. The church cannot easily sidestep the Smith family's crooked history, as countless accounts document their unsavory actions. Joseph Smith Sr. was entangled in shady business deals and left behind substantial debt, forcing the family to flee their communities multiple times. One striking example occurred during their move to Palmyra. The family hired a wagon without the funds to pay the driver, and once this was discovered, the driver evicted them from the wagon, leaving them stranded 100 miles from their destination. This incident is recorded by none other than Lucy Mack Smith herself. The deception is undeniable. Why would they hire a wagon knowing full well they couldn't pay, only to reveal this once they were nearly at their destination? This isn't just an issue of poor judgment. It's a deliberate act of deceit involving not only Joseph Sr. and Jr., but also their mother. The entire family, it seems, was well versed in manipulation and dishonesty, even in the most basic interactions. William Smith, in his desperate attempt to defend the family, wants us to believe that the accusations only began after Joseph's angelic vision. But the weight of evidence tells a different story. Before there was ever talk of golden plates or prophetic visions, the Smiths were notorious for their dishonesty, their drinking, and their failure to contribute meaningfully to their community. Even Joseph Jr. couldn't hide from the truth. His own admissions of many vices and follies confirm what the neighbors had been saying all along. And while he tries to downplay these as youthful errors, the fact remains that his behavior was hardly fitting of someone chosen by God. The LDS Church today can try to whitewash the Smith family's history, but the overwhelming evidence is clear. From Joseph Sr. down to Joseph Jr., deception, manipulation, and dishonesty were deeply ingrained in the very foundation of Mormonism. Thank you so kindly for watching. This is the Ex-Mormon Informant signing off for today.